SNN's meteorologists have been keeping us up to date with what's happening in the tropics. Justin Mosley, Marco Lamanna, and Dan Henry join us now answering questions you may have about this year's hurricane season.
All right, thanks, Kathy, and hi, everybody. Well, hurricane season is now here, and now is the time to get prepared. We're fortunate to be here with you on Suncoast FYI, and I'm not here by myself. I want to bring in the SNN forecast team, and we have meteorologist Marco Lamanna and also Dan Henry. We're here to talk about what we saw with Irma and also what to expect as we head into the season ahead. I think Irma was kind of a wake-up call for us, right, guys?
Yeah, I mean, Irma, even though 2017 we were hit by a hurricane, Florida anyway, in 2016 with Hermine and a close call with Matthew. 2017, as we were talking about actually before we started this, 2017 is really the Suncoast big wake-up call.
Exactly.
Very close call there. We were very fortunate how it ended up for us. But you know, it was still something that a lot of viewers were telling me they had a lot of anxiety over.
Absolutely. Right, Dan? You were just starting.
I was just starting, but first major hurricane for any one of us in the United States, obviously, outside of Harvey. But outside of Harvey, you know, and Irma, there was no major hurricane between 2005 and 2017. So it was an abnormally long time period where we didn't get any sort of strong landfall. And I think that sort of lulled people into a sense of false security that maybe we weren't going to get hit next year because we didn't get hit last year. And unfortunately, that's just not the way it works.
We went through a big hurricane drought, so to speak, and we typically go through these multi-decadal cycles. And as Dan just mentioned, we had this large period where we didn't see any tropical activity, and then just like a light switch, we had so much going on. As we look at the season ahead, a lot of factors that we look at here in our forecast center, along with Colorado State and other forecast entities out there, but we're looking at a big difference in sea surface temperatures, a lot cooler over the open tropical Atlantic, right guys?
Yeah, and it's not typical to be that cool with water temperatures under 80, and in some cases well under 80, as we're seeing with a lot of the Atlantic. Not the case with the Caribbean or the Gulf, but definitely a case out in the Atlantic. And 80 degrees is really the minimum that you're going to need for a hurricane, for a tropical storm to develop. And so with that, what I find most interesting is that the expectation, or at least the outlooks that I saw, were forecasting a weak El Nino, but the cool sea surface temperatures, to me, would represent something a bit stronger than that. So I'm very curious to see how those waters remain and how the temperatures fluctuate going into the very active months in August and September.
And that's just one factor that we look at. We also look in the upper atmosphere, the atmospherics, as I like to call it, to see if there's any wind shear, dry air. Those are factors as well, right, Dan?
Yeah, of course. And actually, going off of what Marco said, whether or not an El Nino develops or a La Nina develops, that's going to influence the patterns of wind shear across the entirety of the tropical Atlantic. So the phase of the El Nino or La Nina doesn't just affect the water temperature. It also affects the patterns of wind shear, where we have different areas of uplift and downlift, so rising and sinking air across the Caribbean, across the tropical Atlantic, and of course the Gulf of Mexico. So those are all obviously big parts of forecasting for the upcoming season.
And on average, we typically see about 12 named storms. 6 of those become hurricanes, and about 2 become major storms as Category 3 or higher. And we're forecasting right now a near normal hurricane season. But the takeaway from all this, despite what we're saying with these numbers, we all need to be prepared as if you were going to be hit by a storm. So it only takes one. I think back to the 1992 hurricane season. We saw Hurricane Andrew, a very slow start to that season. It developed in August, which is fairly late. But again, it hit South Florida with a devastating blow, a Category 5 storm. We've only seen 3 of those in the continental United States making landfall. So again, the idea is to prepare now while we have time. And when we think about preparation, what do we need, Dan?
Well, you need a plan, of course. That's the biggest thing, is the mental part of preparation, is knowing where you'll go in the event that you are asked to evacuate. And then, of course, knowing your zone and knowing where your level, your evacuation level.
And
no
that's
longer
new
a zone.
this season for Sarasota County.
Yeah.
We're now referring to those colors on the map that you see as far as evacuation or as evacuation levels. So beyond that, we really do need to know our evacuation level, and that is new from Sarasota EOC this year. They were referred to as zones. Those are the colors on the map that you typically see telling you where you should evacuate if you live, but those are known as evacuation levels now.
And the thing with the evacuation levels is that they always want people to only evacuate if you're in that zone, to free up the roads for anybody who is actually in the zone. If you're in Zone A, they tell you to evacuate. They don't want people from Zone B and Zone Z to also evacuate. They want Zone A as seamlessly as humanly possible, considering, of course, a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the people who are going to be on the roads preparing. They want those roads to be as clear as possible for the specific zones they want to evacuate.
That's right. We don't want to have like mass chaos out there. The bottom line with all this, when you look at those evacuation levels, the idea you want to run from the water and hide from the wind. And when we say run from the water, you don't have to go hundreds of miles inland. You don't have to go to Orlando. You don't have to go to Arcadia. You can just get away from the coast in a strong structure with hurricane shutters and ride out the storm, even right here in Sarasota County, and be safe. You just want to get away from the storm surge. And that's another big factor when it comes to tropical activity. It's the #1 killer when it comes to tropical weather. Right, Dan?
And unfortunately, Justin, a lot of the time, folks that are victims from storm surge are in evacuation areas. So these are folks that got the evacuation order. They're living right on the coast. A major hurricane, or even a hurricane at all, is approaching, and they chose to not follow the emergency management's instructions and leave their homes. And it's a tough decision to make the choice to evacuate. I have lived in an evacuation zone before. When I first moved down to Florida in 2004, I had to evacuate for Charlie about a week after I moved here, and it was, I was 14. I was terrified. It was an awful experience, but I was safe. We had a big tree branch fall on our house, and it could have been very dangerous if we were inside. And I'm very glad that we ended up leaving.
Exactly. So when you hear those warnings coming out, and we'll be here broadcasting should anything threaten, you really want to heed those warnings coming out from the National Weather Service, and also follow the instructions of the local emergency operations center in the counties that you do live in. You can get all this information that we're referencing on our website. That is snntv.com. Keep in mind, should anything threaten our area, we will be here around the clock. We're your source, the one to watch here along the Suncoast for any severe weather or tropical weather, and you can not only do so on air, but you can do so online and through social media, right?
snntv.com/prepare. We have so much information regarding not just what's out in the Atlantic, where we put up daily videos, but we also have all the information on evacuation levels. We have information on the evacuation centers, where you can actually go, and again, you're thinking tens, not hundreds of miles. And so great information, great tips for not just you, but your pets as well. The pet-friendly shelters in your county, from Manatee through DeSoto, through Charlotte, and of course Sarasota County. All that information is there online.
That also includes the medically dependent as well. You want to think about that, folks that may need special needs there, and also you want to think about your own medications that you may be needing as we approach hurricane season. And yeah, a lot to think about, right, Dan? Including documents and important things like that.
Yeah, of course. You got to make sure that you have, that's part of having a plan, is making sure you have a list of all the things that you need. And the thing is, as we go farther along into hurricane season, it's going to become more active. So June, what we're in right now is typically one of the least active periods of the hurricane season. It's the start, and we sort of ramp up, and it's sort of a gentle incline as we get through July. And then the season really ramps up right around August 15th, and between August 15th and around October 15th, it's that 2-month stretch. Even after summer is over, you'd think that hurricane season would be over, but because there's a seasonal lag between when the temperatures on land are warmest and the temperatures over water are warmest, that means that hurricane season actually lasts well into fall and even into almost the beginning of winter.
And can be more more active, in fact, for the west coast of the state of Florida late in the hurricane season. We look to the south of the Caribbean Sea, and the way the steering pattern set up, they typically see stuff pushing into Florida. So thanks, guys, for being here with us on Suncoast FYI. Just want to reiterate, now is the time to get prepared. That's the takeaway from all of this, while we do not have anything brewing out there in the open waters of the Atlantic Ocean.
All right, thanks so much, Justin, Marco, and Dan, and we'll be right back.